Welcome to Workforce Central, the official podcast of the National Association of Workforce Boards. Stay tuned as we explore the latest resources, thoughts, and trends in workforce development. And now, here's your host, Ron Painter.
Welcome to another edition of Workforce Central, the official podcast of the National Association of Workforce Boards from Washington, D.C. Doug Foresta is at the production dials today, and I'm Ron Painter, your host. I really appreciate Rachel Gragg taking time out to join us. Rachel, hello and welcome.
Thanks.
Rachel is with, Dr. Gragg is with the SNAP Office of Employment and Training. I like to put that in, Rachel, because I think that's important. It certainly represents, if nothing else, persistence. But Rachel is with the SNAP Office of Employment and Training, the Food and Nutrition Service at USDA, which I'm not sure everybody always understands. But Rachel currently is with SNAP. Prior to this, Rachel was the federal policy director for the National Skills Coalition and began her career here in Washington working for the office of Senator Paul Wellstone, who was from Minnesota. She is an undergraduate degree from the University of Texas at Austin, and her PhD in sociology from the University of Washington. So, Rachel, again, welcome and appreciate you joining us.
Sure. Thanks for having me.
I know you and I have chatted before, and I find it interesting, and maybe I'm the only one who thinks it doesn't really understand. SNAP is out of USDA, correct?
Correct. So SNAP is the nutrition program that provides what used to be called food stamps, but which are now called SNAP benefits to low-income individuals to make sure that they have healthy and nutritious food.
So you work with, or you're a simpatico with TANF, Rachel, but it's not, if I'm on TANF, it's not synonymous, I'm on SNAP, and vice versa, correct?
That's right. So there are people who are on both TANF and SNAP, but TANF is a cash assistance program run out of the Department of Health and Human Services, primarily for families with children. And it has a broader mission about helping stabilize low-income families and ideally helping them move to work. SNAP is really, it makes sense that it's out of the Department of Agriculture because it's really about making sure people have access to food.
And so one of the interesting things, for me at least, with SNAP, Rachel, and you are with the employment and training part of SNAP. Tell me about what kind of services come out of SNAP E&T.
Sure. So that's right. We have an Office of Employment and Training in the Food and Nutrition Service at USDA. And we oversee and manage the SNAP Employment and Training Program, which is exactly what it sounds like. It is a training program for people who are receiving SNAP benefits. It's actually a very flexible, robust program and can provide a lot of different services, including paying for tuition or the cost of instruction for occupational training, adult basic education, English as a second language services, other forms of post-secondary education, really any kind of education and training component that is designed to help a SNAP recipient move towards employment and ultimately economic self-sufficiency. Beyond that, though, there are other kinds of services that E&T can also support. So we can help cover a lot of the administrative costs associated with providing employment and training services to individuals. So if an organization is serving our clients and they bring new staff on to help provide those services, we can help cover those costs. We can help cover the costs of things like case management and career navigation or student success coaches. Really, again, if it is something that is designed to help our clients move towards employment and increase their earnings, gain skills and increase their earnings, we're going to be open to having a conversation about helping to support those services because we understand that there's limited capacity in the workforce system right now. And what we're really asking providers to do is to create sort of space for our clients to succeed. We can also provide supportive services, so anything that is deemed reasonable and necessary for one of our SNAP clients to participate in an employment and training program, including things like childcare and transportation assistance, books, tools, uniforms, eyeglasses, things like that.
Wow. So this really, Rachel, tracks to most of or more services than somebody could qualify for under the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act, or the I&O, as I call it. Correct?
It does, and actually, our statute instructs us to work with the workforce development system, and that's really what we aspire to. Coming out of the workforce development field myself, I'm very conscious of the fact that SNAP agencies' mission is not to provide job training, and that they really probably should not be trying to learn how to do that, that there are a lot of people in the field already who have been spending a lot of time learning how to provide high-quality services. And so part of the message that we're really trying to deliver to our states is that they need to go talk to their workforce development system, and they need to go partner with those high-quality job-driven training providers and tap those resources that already exist to make sure that our clients have access to those services. And in terms of our funding, that's right. What we really aspire to do is to fill in those holes and those gaps that exist, that sometimes very low income or very low skilled people can fall through. And, so if you've got a training program where, let's say, the cost of instruction is already covered, maybe somebody's on a Pell Grant or they've got an ITA under WIOA, we would expect that would still be the resource that goes to our client for that cost of instruction, but they're going to need other wraparound services. And so maybe we can braid our funding in to build that sort of, 360 support system that they're going to need to persist and succeed.
So who is, I don't know that there's such a thing, Rachel, as a kind of like the typical SNAP recipient, but who would be eligible? Who would we be looking for that's eligible for SNAP?
So there's a difference between eligibility for SNAP and an eligibility for SNAP E&T. So,
okay.
So there are
who would be eligible
guidelines
for the E&T? Who am I, kind of thinking about when I'm thinking of SNAP E&T?
Sure. So it's actually very broad, and sort of at the most basic level, any person who is receiving SNAP, so long as they're over the age of 16, is eligible for SNAP E&T services. There are, it varies by state, and there can be exemptions or other reasons why people are not required to participate in SNAP E&T. But truly, anybody who's receiving SNAP in many states can volunteer to participate in SNAP E&T, and they could walk through your door. So
the eligibility is a state criteria, Rachel, or this is criteria that at the federal level goes to the states?
It's both. It's both. So there are some state criteria. States can add criteria to the federal criteria, and this gets a little complicated, and I'm happy to direct people to additional resources. But really, truly, the easiest way to think about it is any individual who's receiving SNAP is potentially an E&T client.
Okay.
And that really reflects an interest, and this comes from our secretary and our undersecretary and our administrator all the way down. There is a growing understanding that if somebody is receiving SNAP and they can work, we really want to make sure that they are working. But we do understand that, in order for people to work in stable, decent employment that's going to move them off of SNAP, right, so that they're earning enough so that they don't need the SNAP benefit, they're going to have the skills that employers are looking for. And for many occupations, it's not, if you don't have a high school degree or some sort of post-secondary education beyond high school, a lot of jobs, decent jobs in particular, are out of reach for you. And so our agency has really made a new commitment helping any SNAP recipient who needs that skills training to get a decent job, earn a living wage, and move off of SNAP. We want to help them do that.
So, Rachel, if this is a combination of federal and state, is there a limit to SNAP eligibility? I mean, a time limit to it, a financial limit?
Well, again, so distinguishing between SNAP and SNAP E&T, there are financial and income limitations on SNAP. But once a person is on SNAP, if they're participating in E&T, as long as they remain eligible for SNAP, we don't put any additional limitations on their eligibility for E&T. So there are not time limits. There are not income limits. As long as a person is receiving SNAP, they can be in SNAP E&T. So we don't say, oh, no, you can only serve somebody for 6 months. If they're still on SNAP, they're still eligible for E&T.
Is there a time limit on SNAP in general, Rachel? I mean, I guess there's a differentiation between if I have dependents and don't.
That's right. So there's something called ABODs, which are able-bodied adults without dependents, and they do actually face time limits. The Welfare Reform Act in 1996 created a 3-month, it's called 3 out of 36, which means that ABODs, able-bodied adults without dependents, are only eligible for SNAP for 3 out of 36 months unless they are working or engaged in a work activity, which can include employment and training. So there is a subpopulation of SNAP recipients who do potentially face time limits. People have probably seen some of this in the news because during the Great Recession, most states, all states, I believe, were waived out from under that because unemployment was so high. It wasn't realistic to expect people to be able to find jobs. But now as the economy has strengthened again and the unemployment rate has come down, a number of states have come out from under that waiver. And so many ABODs are now facing the time limits again.
Okay. So that's something that people need to be aware of. If they're going to get people enrolled in some kind of E&T, they need to do that fairly quickly, correct?
Yeah, that's right. And actually, I think more state SNAP agencies are going to be looking to partner with their state workforce system. This statute does define, by statute and by our regulations, participation in a program under WIA, now WIOA, that does meet the definition of a qualifying activity. So I think the workforce system has actually a very important role potentially to play in helping these able-bodied adults without dependents maintain their eligibility for their SNAP benefits. It's really important that people not lose access to nutritious food, obviously, and you know, if the one-stop, the American Job Centers or the state workforce system can help do that, I think that that's going to be a critical partnership that we want to strengthen.
So at the local level, Rachel, where does someone connect to the SNAP? I don't know, system or person, or how do they connect to learn more at the local level about SNAP?
Do you mean like a training provider or like a SNAP client?
I guess the SNAP client, or if I'm at the American Job Center, how do I find out more about what's available under SNAP?
Mm-hmm. So SNAP clients likely are learning about employment and training as part of their intake and eligibility process for their SNAP benefits. Okay. In particular, if they're an able-bodied adult without dependents, they are being told, it's being explained to them that they only have this 3 out of 36 months unless they're engaged in work or work activity, and hopefully they are being directed to services to help them meet those requirements, including the American Job Centers. For the American Job Centers, though, the place where we really need to help facilitate these conversations and strengthening these partnerships is with the state SNAP agency, which is probably in the State Department of Human Services. Okay. Because our relationship, FNS's relationship, is with the state SNAP agency. The funding for this program goes from us to that agency. And then that agency, though, has a lot of flexibility in how it uses those funds and who it partners with to deliver employment and training services. So that's sort of at the local level where that conversation has to take place between those agencies.
Okay, let me step out half a second and remind folks that you're listening to Workforce Central. the official podcast of the National Association of Workforce Boards from Washington, D.C. I'm Ron Painter. My guest today is Rachel Gragg, who is with the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program at the U.S. Department of Agriculture. Rachel, let me ask a little bit, come back and talk a little bit about SNAP funding.
Okay.
I know that TANF, not to confuse people because I get confused, but that that has a component of state and federal funding in it. Is SNAP similar? I mean, does the state have to put some kind of match into this E&T part of SNAP?
So SNAP E&T has, I'm going to talk about two primary funding streams. We have something called 100% funds, which is entirely federal funds that we give to the states by formula to help them administer the program, to help cover the costs of running any employment and training program. That's a very limited pool of funds, though. It's only $90 million annually across 53 employment and training programs.
$1 million across 53?
90 million. 90 million.
Okay.
But that's still, you can see that's still a very small pot of funding when you spread it across 53 states. So it's really not enough for states to build robust job-driven training programs for our SNAP clients if they're only relying on those 100% funds. So there's a second funding stream under SNAP E&T, which is really where I think the potential of this program lies. And very few states are actually capitalizing on this funding stream. And I should say, some states, even though the $90 million in 100% funds is a very small amount, we have some states that are turning some or all of those funds back to us because they're just not using them. So for those of you who have spent so many years trying to scrounge up pennies in the couch seats for workforce development programs.
How well you know this system.
Yes. Yeah, no, I'm very familiar with begging for money. And so I was pretty appalled when I realized that there was money for workforce development that was going back into the federal government. But beyond that, there's something called 50/50 funds. And this is a funding stream that we administer where for any non-federal dollar that isn't otherwise going to match federal funding stream already. So any non-federal dollar that is used to serve an eligible participant in a qualifying component, we can reimburse 50%. So what that means is if there is state investment, city or county investment, philanthropic investment, investments from private employers, social venture funds like what Goodwill generates out of their stores. If they're spending any of those kinds of funds, if that's getting spent on employment and training services for people who are receiving SNAP, and you're not participating in E&T, you are leaving dollars unleveraged because we could be reimbursing 50% of the money that you're spending.
And I think, Rachel, we had chatted about this earlier. The funding comes to the state, correct? So the state is filing its plan with you.
That's right.
So if I have these local monies, that's something that I need to talk to the state because they need to put that in their plan to you, correct?
That's exactly right. So what you would do is you would want to have a conversation with your state SNAP agency and say, hey, I'd like to talk to you about participating in the E&T program. I want to be an E&T provider. And we're actually going to we'd be willing to put up some of the money that we're already spending towards serving these clients. This is what's called a third-party reimbursement model where in some cases, the state isn't actually putting any money up. Like Goodwill, for example, if they took money out of their stores and they said, we're going to take $100,000 that we've in revenue that we've raised out of our stores, we're going to commit this to serving SNAP clients and we're going to participate as an E&T training provider, they would enter into a contract or an MOU with the state SNAP agency to do that. The Goodwill or some other, whoever the training provider is, would put those funds up. And the state would actually function almost as a pass-through where they submit for reimbursement from us, but then the money just goes back to the training provider to reimburse them for the services that they have provided.
Wow. This is almost like, I always hate to say, but I mean, this is really pretty no-brainer, right? I mean, if I've got some funds locally, maybe a community foundation is working with me, or the United Way, you mentioned Goodwill. This is something that I should let the state know and figure out how do we advance this to you.
Yeah, no, it's not an accident that I came to work here in the workforce development field, because I really do see this as such an untapped opportunity to really create new capacity to provide training services. I will be honest, it is not always easy to do that upfront work with the state SNAP agency. And we already know this, right? And we know this is one of the things that WIOA is trying to address, to help agencies work better together, overcome some of those silos, meet the person who works down the hall from you who you've never even talked to, right?
Absolute.
So it is not the easiest thing in the world to do, and it is a complicated program that can be administratively difficult to sort of sort through the stuff at the beginning. But it can be done. We have new staff capacity to help states that want to do this, to provide TA. We're very interested in figuring out ways to make this happen. So we would be happy to come into a state if there's interest someplace. We would be happy to come in and try and help facilitate those conversations and make it work. But just to give people the sense of what you can do with this program, so the one state that we have that really has a great SNAP E&T program is Washington State. No surprise there. I'm sure Washington State is great at everything.
Yeah.
And they have been working on this program for about 10 years. When they started, they had one community college and 4 CBOs, and they were spending about $250,000 a year on the program. Now, in their most recent year, they had all 34 of their community colleges across the state participating, and about, I think, 35 or so CBOs also participating, and their SNAP E&T program is $33 million in total expenditures. And just to help you really understand, only about $5 million of that is 100% funds that we gave to them. The rest is 50-50 funds that they have leveraged through their E&T program.
Awesome example. Rachel, kind of challenges or concerns ahead for the SNAP program, E&T?
Well, we've touched on it a little bit. The sort of thing that's really urgent in front of us is the fact that we are going to have a lot of able-bodied adults without dependents whose time clocks have started to tick, and where, if we don't figure out a way to make sure they have access to qualifying, either they're employed or in an employment and training component, they're going to burn through their time and lose their access to food benefits. And if we can't sort of get our arms around that in very quick order, there are estimates that as many as 1 million people could lose their SNAP benefits this year. Wow.
I guess one kind of technical question. So if they're involved in an E&T, if I'm an ABOD and I'm involved in E&T part of SNAP, do I continue to qualify for food stamps, or that's a separate?
Yes, So if they're participating in an E&T component, that will stop their clock from ticking.
Awesome. Rachel, where could somebody learn more information about the SNAP E&T program?
So we actually have a resource page on our website. So if you just go to USDA.gov and search for SNAP Employment and Training inside USDA's website, you could even just Google it, I think. Just Google SNAP Employment and Training, and it will bring you to our resource page. People are welcome to contact me as well.
And how would they do that?
My email address is Rachel, RACHEL.GRAGG @fns.usda.gov.
Awesome. Dr. Rachel Gragg. Rachel, great to have seen you this past week at the national convening, and thank you for joining me today.
Oh, thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to talk about the program. I really want to work with the workforce development system, and it seems like it's a win for both of us. We can create new capacity for you guys and make sure our clients have access to good training and employment services.
It certainly does, and we'll come back and touch base again, Rachel, and see how we're doing. Just to mention that if you're coming to Forum 2016, March 12th through the 15th here in Washington D.C., hosted by NAWB, SNAP E&T will be a part of the quick shops on Monday afternoon, so you can stop and get some more information. You've been listening to Workforce Central, the official podcast of the National Association of Workforce Boards from Washington, D.C. And on behalf of NAWB and its members, I'm Ron Painter. Thanks for joining us.